Hey, welcome back into the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, this segment might look a little bit different tonight. Lando is our usual host for the DraftKings, the daily fantasy sports lineup. He's going to have a video dropping tomorrow, but I thought, you know what? I want to get on the fun. I want to have some time to maybe build a lineup and try my hand. I don't do too bad with DFS. I'm not certainly the expert like Landon is. But I feel like I do all right. So I'm going to be here with you guys building a lineup tonight. You will see me kind of go through and build my team. We are playing in the $2 million play action. Small little contest to get into, but we're going to have a little bit of fun building a lineup, and obviously for grand prize pool, bigger plays, when you're playing against hundreds of thousands, you'll see this contest will have about 750,000 entries. You need to take shots. You need to build your lineup a certain way. And so this lineup is something that you could play in all grand prize pool tournaments. Scotty is here, of course, producer Scott. We're just going to roll. So the way that I usually build my lineups, I like to look for value first and then fill in my studs later. And the reason I do it this way is so, at the end of the day, is there going to be a huge difference to me if I have $8,500, $9,000 left between DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams? No, not really. I mean, last week, both of those guys, 16 targets, 14 receptions, 150 yards, finished in the top three wide receivers. When I get down to the stud players, it's really razor thin between the margins of those guys. So I like to look for value first. That's just a preferential move on my part, but it's how I roll. Before we kick things off, you'll see in the image below me, there are some notable injuries this week and guys that you definitely want to stay away from for DFS and for your fantasy lineups. And we'll sort of spend a little bit of time while people get in here talking about some of these injuries. So Chris Godwin is doubtful. Now, he hasn't been ruled out, but he was put into the concussion protocol late in the week, and he's going to be tough to get clearance to play Sunday. I put a lot of faith into Mike Evans in this matchup after a pretty underwhelming week one. I know he was limited and a late start, but now Mike Evans might be leaned on heavily in this matchup. Maybe Gronk will get involved too, but Chris Godwin for me this week is probably a hands-off. He will be probably a game-time decision, but he is doubtful as of right now, and we're not going to build him into any lineups tonight. Kenny Galladay has been ruled out for the second straight week, so we're not going to play him. A.J. Brown was a late addition to the injury report, and so he will be out this week as well. And then George Kittle, Kyle Shanahan came out and said George Kittle will not play. You saw the 49ers sign Mohamed Sanu. We're still waiting on Debo. He is going to be out for at least 3 weeks being on IR, and Brandon Ayuk is still a question mark. So I am going to probably look in this lineup to play some Rahim Mostert, who looked fantastic last week all over the field, was the clear-cut leader in that backfield, and I think he's reasonably priced in DraftKings this week, so we'll see if we can fit him into this lineup or not. So with that being said, you saw the title of the stream, you saw the thumbnail. Jonathan Taylor is an absolute, what we like to call free square, meaning he is completely undervalued, but because of that, a lot of people are smart. A lot of people are savvy these days. He's going to be heavily owned. So in DraftKings with this many people, right, 792,000 entries, we want to create a roster that is unique and different from other people. So we can look at, unpopular plays like maybe Deshaun Watson against the, I believe it's the Chiefs this week. No, the Ravens, sorry. Deshaun Watson against the Ravens on paper looks like a terrible matchup, but he might be a low-owned player, so that makes your lineup a little bit more unique. But Jonathan Taylor, just for $5,700, is a player that I just can't get away from this week, and so I'm going to start right here building up my lineup with Jonathan Taylor, $5,700. Going up against the Vikings, who got shredded by the Packers last week. Not so much on the ground, but through the air. But Jonathan Taylor also caught 6 balls, and Phillip Rivers is the check down master. So look for Jonathan Taylor's workload to remain pretty steady. I like money too, Scotty. I really like money too. So we're going to kick things off with Jonathan Taylor. And then another guy that really grabbed my eye from a value point. Now, you can also click the search bar. You don't have to scroll through. We're going to go with Deontay Johnson, $4,500. I think Deontay is a fantastic play this week. To me, watching the game, I know Juju was the one to get into the end zone twice, and from a fantasy perspective, really lit up your leaderboard. But Deontay Johnson, to me, looked the most polished and the most involved. Again, Juju was involved in the red zone, caught the 2 touchdown passes. But to me, Deontay Johnson looks like almost like, old shades of what Antonio Brown was for this offense. He was the most dynamic. He was working the intermediate center parts of the field, dropped a couple balls, but they haven't had Big Ben. They haven't had Big Ben in a year. That chemistry is going to take some time to develop. I really like Deontay Johnson. And at $4,500, again, probably heavily owned, but a smash play, just one I can't get away from. At this point, again, this is just me going through my process. I like to go down to my defense. I like to get that out of the way. And I know Landon last week, shout out to Landon, who had an unbelievable roster, won a pretty decent amount of money last week. Aaron Rodgers, he stacked up with Devontae Adams. They finished as quarterback 2 and wide receiver 1 on the week. So that stack as alone, setting the core for Landon's lineups really served him well. And then he went all in on the Washington football team's defense at $3,000, bottom of the barrel. And they were the number 1 defense on the week, along with the $4,000 Steelers. So he saved $1,000 and got a defense that was the top in the league. So I'm kind of along the same lines as Landon. I like to go with the value play. Now, the Chargers defense last week did look good. Their offense did not look good. They're going up against KC, so I'm not about that life. Just kind of scrolling through here, man, there's not a whole lot at the bottom that I really want to get my hands on. Pittsburgh, those 3 wide receivers look great. James Washington, Deontay Johnson, Juju. I think Ben, they're going to want to throw the ball a ton. This might be a little bit of a homer play, but I don't mind the Green Bay Packers and those Lions. Kenny Galladay's out. There's some uncertainty in that running game. It looks like Adrian Peterson's the lead back. Who knows how involved DeAndre Swift will be, or Kerryon Johnson. But the Packers they're no stranger to Adrian Peterson, and they know how to stop that run. I think the Packers defense is a sneaky little play here. I think they roll again this week. They're going to want to run this game out. I'm going to go with the Packers in a division matchup against the Lions, and they're going to close that guy out. So $3,300, not too expensive, saves us a little bit of cash. And the reason I do that is so that when I am targeting these other skill positions like running back and wide receiver, I get my defense out of the way, and so it gives me a better idea with that average remaining player number. You'll see here it goes to 5,600, but when I get my defense out of the way, it gives me a better idea as what the value I can have. So from there, I go to tight end. I pick my 2 value players. I pick my defense, and then I go to tight end. And George Kittle's out, right? So George Kittle, please don't play him. You can see the O beside his name there. George Kittle will not play, and he will yield you 0 fantasy points and 0 money in your pocket. So don't go there. I love Mark Andrews this week. Zach Ertz is also going to be tough to get away from. Travis Kelce for $7,000. I'm not really willing to pay up against what seems to be a decent Chargers defense. Not to say that they're going to be able to stop the Chiefs, but I'm tempering expectations. So I'm going to look to get a little bit more on the value play side. And for me, I'm willing to give Tyler Higby a pass on last week. Jared Goff looked really good in the pocket. The ball was getting out quick. That's a huge improvement from last year. I mean, he still threw for 4,600 yards, but at times was criticized for holding that ball a little bit too long and taking unnecessary sacks. I thought he did a good job of getting the ball out. I expect that Tyler Higby will be a little bit more involved and a little bit more reliable this week. So for $4,700, I am giving Tyler Higby a pass and doubling down on him. I'm going to go to quarterback. Quarterback is a position where you can either spend up and get that stud like Lamar Jackson against Houston this week, or we can spend down and really work those positional plays. So, I mean, Josh Allen against the Dolphins this week is about as sexy as it gets. I mean, it's a chalky play. He'll probably be highly owned, and that's where I'm saying that pivoting to Deshaun Watson against the Ravens, who knows? I mean, last week we saw him against the Chiefs really kind of show up in garbage time and, turn a 5-point fantasy outing into a 23-point fantasy outing. And if you look at the history of Deshaun Watson, after a big loss, he comes back in a big way time and time again. This is a trait that he has, and I think rostering Deshaun Watson here is potentially a decent move. I'm not 100% sold on it, but a decent move. Kyler Murray at 6,100 is also something that I am tempted with. I know Washington defense was pretty solid last week against the Eagles, but they're banged up. They didn't have Miles Sanders. Jalen Reagor was not utilized as much as I thought he would be. 1 catch for 55 yards. So I'm not completely sold that Washington defense is legit, but I am sold that Chase Young is legit. I am going to go with my stack. I love stacking my quarterback and my tight end together, especially in DFS. I mean, if we can stack 3 players together on the same team, like the Rams might not be the best example here, but if we could afford it, a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a Travis Kelce, a Patrick Mahomes, stack those 3 up. We own more players from the same roster, so it's probably less likely that these players will all be on the same team. So we'll have a unique lineup in a sense that way. And if they all hit in a big scoring game, then we will differentiate ourselves from the pack. But Jared Goff and Tyler Higby is where I'm going to spend my money. And, now I've got $6,500 per player left for my running back, 2 wide receivers, and my flex. And this is a wonderful place for me right now. I like the spot that I sit in. Another running back that really grabbed my attention this week is Rahim Mostert. So we already talked about, they have a soft matchup against the Jets, but we already talked to the holes in their receiving corps. George Kittle not going to be there to carry the load. So Jordan Reed at the tight end position might be utilized. We saw him get a couple targets last week. Deebo Samuel not coming back. Brandon Ayuk, still questionable. They signed Mohamed Sanu. I just think that this team is going to be able to run the ball, and they're going to need to run the ball because they are just so unhealthy in so many other areas. So Rahim Mostert, $6,400. I love that. I think he's going to run wild. He looked great week 1. So I'm going to roll with Rahim. So Jared Goff, Rahim Mostert, Jonathan Taylor, Deontay Johnson, Tyler Higby, and Packers D. That leaves us with 2 wide receiver and a flex left. And I love being able to have enough money to put a reasonable running back in my flex. I think if you can start 3 running backs, you're in good shape. It's really hard not to take Davante Adams after that week 1. Same with DeAndre Hopkins. Davante Adams eats against the Lions. It's just what he does. There's probably no doubt in my mind that he finishes as the wide receiver 1 this year. Just when you figure, Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Allen Lazard aren't competing for Davante Adams' targets. They're not taking away from his ceiling. Aaron Rodgers has a trusted guy that he loves. I might try to fit Davante Adams into my lineup here. Just going down. Calvin Ridley is also a nice little play. The Dallas defense has been super soft and not something that I'm very afraid of. DJ Moore is low, and I'll say one thing. The Carolina Panthers offense last week surprised me. It was a lot better than I thought it was, but fantasy owners are panicked on DJ Moore because he didn't produce for them. And so I think this is a good little bounce back spot for DJ Moore. I really, really like the potential to him and come out and, against last year, the 30th best or second worst secondary in the league in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, have a decent game. Now, their run defense was number 1, but their secondary a little bit susceptible to to wide receiver. So I'm going to take some value on DJ Moore, and that bumps me up just a little bit. And I'm going to see, now this is kind of where you kind of get to pick and choose. If I take Davante Adams, what can I afford at my flex? And I'm looking at guys like TJ Hawkinson. No, thank you. Even though he had a great week 1, TJ Hawkinson also had a great week 1 last year, and then we never heard from him again. Not saying that's going to be the case, but Ronald Jones could be a decent play, probably for the price, decently owned. Melvin Gordon against Pittsburgh, who projects to be a top 3 defense this year from a fantasy perspective. Melvin Gordon against Pittsburgh isn't a wonderful play, but when you look at Phillip Lindsay probably not playing this week, I think he is actually ruled out. I'll have to double check that come Sunday. Being ruled out, Royce Freeman probably not going to take away from Melvin Gordon's workload, and so Melvin Gordon could be a nice volume play and a low-owned play. So if Melvin Gordon has a big game, maybe gets into the end zone 1 or 2 times, I could see Melvin Gordon being the differentiator for this lineup. And with how much Davante Adams costs as well, yes, he might be owned, but not as much, because you have to get crafty in other spots to fit him in your lineup. So $5,200 with Melvin Gordon, I think I'm going to go with that. Just, for the reasons I stated. Low-owned, in a bad matchup, but Denver's still going to score. They're going to play. They're going to play ball, and I think Melvin Gordon with the limited help from the backfield is going to be the guy. Might not be a huge yardage game, but it's going to be a volume game, and if he can do something with it, could be really solid. So $0 left over. We used all of our budget. Sometimes that's not necessarily the best thing to do, but Jared Goff, Rahim Mostert, Jonathan Taylor, Davante Adams, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Tyler Higby, Melvin Gordon, and the Packers defense. Let me know what you guys think of this lineup. I know we got 7 of you with us right now. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and clicking that like button or consider subscribing to the channel, we do this every single week. We also do a live stream on Sundays, 1 hour before kickoff. Landon will be doing it this week. I will be unable to join the stream. So if you guys can drop by, amazing. We had a really, really good week last week, gave a lot of good advice, and definitely helped a lot of people win some matchups. We were big on the J.K. Dobbins train last week, told people to start him over a ton of people, and consequently won some people some matchups with that advice, which is always great. I did call Odell Beckham Jr. last night for, I think I said 7 receptions, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. He was, I think, 4 for 70, 76. Don't quote me on that, and a touchdown. So not bad, not close, but I did put some faith into OBJ as well. I think that's going to do it for me. Check us out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're pretty much there. We just got onto Amazon Music as well. Just search The Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. You can get us on Instagram and Twitter at snap_fantasy, and you can get me at mtout23. Thanks so much for kicking it with us, guys, and we will see you on Sunday for the live stream. All right, take care, and let's win some Kashish this week. See ya.